Hey, kids, and howdy. It is time for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. I am your host, Dr. Michael Lennox. We are here to talk about the week, astrologically, of February 28th through March 6th. And oh, my Lord, I've been looking forward to this podcast episode and this week and this new moon for 2.5 months. I think you will agree with me, Zoe. The last few months have been a little bit rough.
Yes. Oh, is this like a ceiling of that time ending?
Yes. Well, life continues. I mean, here's the funny thing about like astrology. It's like, yes, it's over for sure. And I'm going to talk about today in some detail about like how and why that it is over. But it's also understand something. Astrology doesn't begin and end. It's not like a light switch that goes on and then gets turned off. Like life is fluid and movement oriented. Like sometimes when in my shorter versions of putting things out there, like my Red Robe Astrology videos, and I'll say, it's a quiet day. And sometimes people will respond like, it ain't quiet over here. And it's like, all right, I had to change my language a little bit. Quiet day is for me, meaning I have less to talk about today. So it's a quiet day in the planets might mean there isn't some new big wave of energy to describe, but it doesn't mean that life isn't in session. So by the same token, while this new moon really and truly does put to bed the powerful, tumultuous, and challenging double retrograde that we've been through, and it does so with the kind of precision that I personally love as an astrologer. So I'm even more jazzed to share that with all of y'all today. Understand, it ain't a switch off.
Yeah.
And it isn't like, it's not like going to see a movie and then the movie's over and then you can talk about it. The experiences that were generated since late November, they've changed us completely. So of course it's not over. It's that we are done with what I would call the process of self-actualization and healing and integration that the planets were reflecting. And from that perspective, that is the perspective of an opportunity to dive into the inner landscape and have some stuff shift around in it, that is over. And then we have a new moon that ends it. So I love that too, because that's not an ending, that's a beginning.
Yeah, it is.
So I've been talking about it a lot in anticipation of it as the ending or the threshold that we cross over that says the brutality of the personal experience that we've been going through ends. But then it's the beginning of a new cycle. And what my hope for myself and for all of us is that as we face this moment of setting intentions and starting up again in the Pisces mansion, that we take everything that we have discovered, uncovered, and expanded in our inner landscape and have even more magnificent experiences by virtue of just moving forward differently than we were, say, just early November. So in some ways, really, November does signal the beginning of our journey because it was in the third week of November, specifically November 18th, that Venus moved into the territory where she was going to backtrack over and hit the same little swath of the Capricorn mansion 3 times in total. That first act, which took place sort of between November 18th and December 19th, when she turned around. Those 4 weeks really did give us a clue and a sense of what we were going to be grappling with emotionally when she did turn around. Now, one thing that I will tell you about my personal experience of this, because man, I'll tell you, this was brutal. Capricorn mansion starts in my first house of self and my south node of karma and the past and, the baggage we have to clean up in this life is also in my first house. And so I moved through those 4 months with really lovely emotional things brewing and relationship dynamics changing a little bit. So I kind of thought my Venus retrograde was going to be yummy, and it turned out to be incredibly difficult because it was forcing, allowing, however you want to put it, me personally to do a lot of digging into my past. And I suspect that something similar happened for a lot of other people simply because I have the pulse on what people are experiencing through my emails, my DMs on all the different platforms that I interact with, and people are telling me every
Right.
day what they are experiencing. So, as we get ready to wrap up Venus's shadow, I do invite all of you to think about what were you exploring, learning about, and being called to pay attention to in your relationship dynamics, in your emotional body, anything that might trigger deep feelings. The process started in November. Then on the 19th of December, Venus turned around and she stayed in this retrograde process through the end of January, January 29th. In fact, she turned around, went direct, and completed that process. So that was the juicy, deep part of the backward journey. I like to use the phrase we were in the below. The below being, well, like literally below the surface of your consciousness a little bit. When the emotional body planet is hovering in the below, why that's so challenging is that most of the feelings that we express in our bodies is being triggered by thoughts we are having that are in the unconscious. It's one of the ways we know that the unconscious is expressing a conflict is it'll show up in our bodies as over emotionality, anxiety, fantasies about things that reveal that you're frightened or in conflict about high stakes emotional processes or relationships or experiences. So we had that rich retrograde process that was, in fact, made even more transformational because Venus began and will end her journey with Pluto, the death and rebirth planet. That's Pluto's way. Change happens in a number of different ways. And the two agents of change in astrology are Pluto and Uranus. Uranus is the agent of change that's fast and revolutionary, sudden and unexpected. Pluto's change mechanism goes way, way deeper. When Pluto's in the house, he's saying things like, we're going to go down to the molecular level of who you are and how you feel, how you express those feelings, and what might be keeping you from being more vulnerable, open, and expressive of your feelings in a world where that doesn't always feel safe. This process of Venus in these unconscious spaces with marching orders from Pluto really did a lot of stuff with us, for us, through us, and as us that facilitated great shift and change at the emotional level.
That was ending last month, right? At the end of last month.
Yes, in fact, January 29th was the day the retrograde ended and she turned around and went direct.
Got it.
This is an important moment to look back at if you want an overview of what you've been through that this new moon sort of puts a button on. When Venus went direct, I know in my experience, in my personal experience, the relationship that I was struggling with had a really interesting expression that day. Right? So it can really be as literal as this day is astrologically significant and it might be significant for you. Venus turned around at the very end of January. That's an important moment to look back and see, well, what was rising up out of your emotional experience in those last few days of January? Because that would have been also a hint at what was emerging out of your emotional body's unconscious territory. In my writing, I used a lot of words over and over again during these months, like vulnerability and intimacy.
Yeah.
Love with other human beings, whether it's romantic or not, requires both of these things.
Right.
Intimacy is terrifying
Yes, it is.
because it's vulnerable, and vulnerable feels dangerous. Therefore, intimacy can feel dangerous. Now, what's odd about that is that the safety we long for, we come to through intimacy and vulnerability. In fact, the Capricorn mansion is so much about control and goals and getting in a particular direction. You might call it the antithetical energy to vulnerability and intimacy.
Interesting. So you would say like someone who's Capricorn heavy is more pushing forward
Yeah,
rather
well,
than
more
sitting
likely
in.
to be so aligned with the idea of what's the goal, where am I going,
Got
and
it.
what's the purpose, there'd be less availability in that consciousness for what we learn in a more feminine way through
Got
our
it.
feelings. Now, it's no mistake that the opposite sign of Capricorn is Cancer, the most vulnerable, tender, and potentially intimate sign because it says, I'm filled with feeling. I might have to protect myself with that shell, right? But I am all about feelings, intimacy, and vulnerability. So the Capricorn mansion holds the other side of that dynamic that happens when we have Capricorn and Cancer operating. Cancer archetype is how we lean into vulnerability, and the Capricorn archetype is the mountain that we climb of our ambitions, but you can't climb up effectively unless you're taking care of yourself vulnerably along the way. So, all of this to just help you guys understand the power of all of this retrograde energy happening in the Capricorn mansion. It's not about Cancer. I'm using that as a touchstone to help us all understand that by virtue of having these two planets going retrograde in the sign of Capricorn, is that we are really dismantling old structures of emotional protection that we use to keep our ability to climb the mountain of our desires without having to be vulnerable to what our heart might really crave. And these few months of this double retrograde is busting through all of that. Hopefully, the lesson we come out on the other side with is that I can know what mountain of ambition, goal, and desire I want to climb, and I can do it more openly, vulnerably, and intimately with other human beings because I've opened my heart at a deep level. So the third act of Venus's retrograde started on January 29th when she turned around and started moving forward again. So all of February and the first couple of days of March, Venus is still in this process. She's not backward moving, but we are integrating because she's repeating transits that she hit late November, all of December, then again in January. She's been here before. And
Yeah.
so we start this week off continuing to wrap up and learn what Venus's retrograde had to offer us. But she ends her shadow tomorrow, Tuesday evening at around 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. But who's counting? The process that started in late November really, truly ends Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, period. So if you've been listening to my podcast for a while or you've been reading my dailies for a bit, you know that I love precision in astrology because it's all about geometry. And geometry is more powerful when the angles are precise. And the moment that precision begins to wane, the energy diminishes. So this includes the timing of certain things. So the fact that Venus finishes her retrograde at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday morning at 9:34 a.m., so 15 hours later, we have the new moon.
Mm.
That's why I'm drawing a line in the sand and saying we are done. And this new moon energy allows us to take into account everything we've been through and how much we have shifted in our hearts and in our minds. And we get to funnel them right into a gorgeous, juicy, and powerful new moon in Pisces that hits this Wednesday. This new moon is stunning.
Mm.
It's so beautiful in the Piscean sensibility. Not that there aren't challenges in the Pisces mansion for some people. I personally orient beautifully to Pisces energy, and not everybody will because everybody's a little different. And Pisces is a water sign, which means it has a depth of emotionality. It's also a sign that vibrates so powerfully in like energy and connection that there is no form in the Pisces mansion. And that can be very
Mm.
challenging energy for people who are more analytical or structural or earthy. So it's not like everybody loves the Pisces mansion, but it is the one that invented things like forgiveness, compassion, and a deep, abiding sense that our spiritual connection to the universe that invented us is constant, pre installed, and not something that we can separate ourselves from. So, in a new moon in Pisces, whether we are aware of it or not, we are setting intentions that come directly from our sense of anything is possible. When we understand how manifestation works, that everything begins as an idea in the unconscious, and that in the connectedness that Pisces invented, forgiveness and compassion is easy because this is the mansion where we understood or understand that you and I are one. So if I'm running around resenting and judging and attacking you, I'm doing that to me. Pisces teaches us that. What juices up the Pisces energy even more in this new moon is that Jupiter is in Pisces, and so is Neptune, the Pisces ruler. Neptune is our spiritual connection. Jupiter is how we understand abundance and all possibility. You could even say that Jupiter is the manifestation planet. In classical astrology, Jupiter ruled Pisces. So there's an affinity for easy access to create anything you might desire when the planet of manifestation is hanging out with a new moon. And the mansion that they're hanging out in is the one that tells us everything that we desire to create is possible as long as we start from the inside out. As long as we back up our desires with our connection to the universe that invented us, we have much more capacity to create.
Mm.
Any new moon conjunct Jupiter is a new moon where we can think big, kids. Don't shrink back from desiring to intend to create enormous new yummy. Because we've been through a lot to prepare to receive more. And this is the new moon that says, have at it.
I'm a Pisces rising. Pisces season has hit me.
In a way that you would call pleasant or challenging.
Um, Emotional,
Yeah.
I'd say. You know what I mean? Like it's not challenging in the way that I can't handle it,
Right.
but it's not pleasant in that I just got to sit with it.
You just got to
know?
sit with it. And here's what I'll say about this, and this is going to be instructive for anyone listening. I promise you, Zoe, that next Pisces season won't be as befuddling, and last Pisces season wasn't as befuddling.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because as a Pisces rising, you will always vibe strongly with Pisces energy. But right now, we've been through this crazy double retrograde that no one is escaping. So the Pisces
Mm,
moment deepens our sort of inner experience of that. And I think that's valuable, right? If everything's been happening in the below, under the surface of consciousness, the fact that the sun and the moon move into Pisces when we complete it means it's like we are meeting the center of our desires in the territory where our desires live. This is the complicated thing about being a human with desires because we have them, we know they're there, but they originate from an unconscious place, which means some of how or why or what we desire comes from things that we don't know about. But we are
right.
all much more aware of what's in the unconscious as a result of moving through November, December, January, and February, setting us up for this very stunning opportunity to set new intentions that allow for even greater expressions of love and possibility at this time and in this way. If you've been listening for a while, or you pay attention to astrology in other ways as well, you know that the planet Mars entered Capricorn a while back. And about a week and a half ago, Mars caught up with Venus, and they have been hanging out together for a while. Really, since the middle of February, around 12th, 13th, 14th, the planet of action, embodiment, decision making, and behavior, that's Mars, caught up with Venus. I love that he caught up with her after she was done with her backward motion because she had with her all of this juicy, yummy, sensitive information that she gathered from our individual unconscious territory. So Mars catching up with her, here's that conversation. It's like, "Hey baby, how you been? I haven't seen you in a year or two. Hi honey, come on in. Have I got stories for you?" That's Venus. And she unloads or opens up all of the rich material she's got because she's been in the place where our desires live. Mars is the planet through which we cause our desires to become form through behaviors, choices, and actions. So the fact that Venus and Mars have been hanging out together for like a month, which is very rare and unprecedented, has been an incredible boon to us. That as we've been trekking through this deep emotional territory, we have also been empowered to make new choices and decisions even before the paint is dry on the new stuff we are learning.
Mhm.
And that has a wrap up with this beautiful new moon. Because when the sun and the moon are together at 12 degrees of Pisces on Wednesday morning, Mars and Venus will have caught up to Pluto once again. Now remember, Venus started this whole process by hanging out with Pluto for about a week. So she and Pluto, they had their Congress all through that sort of middle of December territory. That's the time when Venus and Pluto were hanging out before she turned around. And then she turned around and hung out with him some more. And so what's happening in this new moon is Venus and Pluto are back together. And I just love that it's on the same day. It's exact on the same day as the new moon. That's like the most exciting thing for this astrologer is this kind of precision. And this is another reason I've been declaring that this is a threshold. This is a completion. Pluto designed this whole setup. He's been in charge since November. So the fact that Venus and Mars are meeting with Pluto during that new moon on Wednesday, March 2nd, means there's a kind of completion of a process. And Mars's presence is the part of that completion that says, now I got this. I will take everything that you have offered me, you, Venus, you, Pluto, and move forward with all of this tenderness and vulnerability and willingness to try new ways of giving and receiving of love. And then as Mars moves around the zodiac over the next year and touches all of the chart points in everyone's natal charts, we will each be downloaded with even deeper capacities to behave in new ways because of what we've learned in November, December, January, and February, and early March. These few months are like the school we've been in. We graduate with this new moon, but we get to take the wisdom and move forward differently because we know more intimately who we are below the surface of our consciousness. The juicy piece of this is that Mars, Venus, and Pluto are all trining the north node of the moon during this new moon. That means all of what we are marshaling on the inside of our consciousness, creating a sense of self-actualization, wholeness, completeness, and new levels of integration, are going to sail us forward to the future that we're creating. That's what the North Node represents. So to have a new moon where we set new intentions with this powerful stellium of energy saying, now we get to move forward, that makes this an incredibly exciting new moon filled with possibility. Now, we're not quite done with all of the stuff that's involved in this new moon because Mercury has been part of this process as well. Mercury also went retrograde in Capricorn, although he straddled Capricorn and Aquarius. And this means that he has been visiting the land of both structure and the way we talked about Capricorn earlier, but he also moved into Aquarius. Understand that Mercury has borrowed both a sense of goal, purpose, and a powerful sense of how we're going to move forward. That's Capricorn energy. And intuition, a sense of unexpected guidance. The Aquarian thing of downloads and inspiration can come suddenly out of nowhere and help us in our journey forward. Mercury was very busy helping us in the below integrate mind and heart, thoughts and feelings down there. Mercury being retrograde at the same time and in the same mansion as Venus has also been helping us align our thinking with our deserving consciousness. And hopefully we've been expanding our deserving through Venus's motion. Mercury then picks up the slack and brings the thought process piece to this new moon moment. Now, he's been out of his shadow since a while ago, so he's not wrapping up. He's done. But he's doing something interesting at the exact moment of this new moon. He's conjuncting Saturn. We are setting intentions right now in a manner that I think is pretty freaking high stakes because our emotional experience has been so transformed. It really counts what we say to ourselves, to the mirror, and to the world, what it is we desire to create with this new moon. And the fact that the teacher is in the room, Saturn and Mercury conjunct, will give us a kind of soberness to this idea of intentions we set now. The moon conjunct Jupiter and Neptune says to us, anything and everything is possible. So we do need a little something to balance that out, right? Because you can't actually manifest something that you don't have the capacity to create. Mercury with Saturn allows us to be sort of serious, grounded, realistic in the scope of energy that can be so over the top with anything that's possible. I like the idea that there's a kind of realistic, grounded, sober sense of what the mind is going to think about because he's hanging out with Saturn, the great teacher, during this new moon. So I like it. Truly, this might be, I'm subject to hyperbole, so I'll say this every month at the new moon. the most important new moon of the year. But I mean it because we've just been through so much change and transformation. What we declare we desire next counts in ways that go very, very deep. So Wednesday is your day to set powerful intentions based on everything you've learned for the last 3-4 months. Have at it, everybody.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. So I've brought in an email dream today. We have a short little one. I thought the dream with money was so interesting, and so I brought this one in as well. This dream is from Rachel. In my dream, a friend and I were in a country where we didn't speak the language. It wasn't terribly bright outside, maybe just after sunset, and we were leaving a restaurant and in an alley. A panhandler approached me and I gave him a coin. He tried to give me a $20 back. I refused, thinking he didn't understand. He was giving me more than I gave him. Instead, I offered him 2 coins. And this time, he tried to give me 2 20s. It didn't feel menacing like a trap or a scam, but I still refused. I wasn't going to take money from someone begging for it. Yes, I'm handling some delicate financial transactions right now, but I'm not traveling or going out to restaurants. The transactions are in relation to an all-encompassing long-term project that has my stress level blowing out my adrenal glands. Fortunately, the end is in sight. What are your thoughts, Ray?
The panhandler approach, she gives him a coin. He gives her back a 20.
Yes.
Then she tries to give 2 coins. Oh, and then he tries to give back 2 20s.
Exactly.
So he always has the 20s. She always has the coins.
Yes.
It's a 1-on-1 exchange followed by a 2-on-2 exchange.
Exactly.
With her judging the process in the meantime. Okay. Clearly, it's a dream about abundance, prosperity, and a relationship to money. And the dreamer tells us exactly why.
Oh.
That there's a waking life experience that is challenging. It includes finances, and it sounds like it has some risk inside of it. So if we're in some territory that we've never been in before, like a financial conversation that is high stakes but new, that could be akin to the symbolism of a foreign country. Right? We're in a foreign country, and if all of what happens is about money and abundance, and the waking life story is about money and abundance, then the foreign country we're in is the country of abundance.
Oh, okay.
Where she doesn't speak the language. So she's got all of this waking life fear around what money does or doesn't do. That's usually what our fears about money are going to connect to, not about what it can do, but what happens when we lose it. There's something interesting to me about the timing of the dream, not the timing of having the dream, the time of day, right? It is still daytime, but just barely. Like we're not really in nighttime. We're in that sort of twilight just after sunset, and it's not very bright. That's interesting to me because we're not quite in a shadow dream, meaning we're not discovering something brand new. Nighttime dreams mean we're in shadow territory and exploring something that is not visible to us. That halfway between daytime and nighttime, where it's getting dimmer, means we're a little conscious of what this dream is showing us, but also a little bit not conscious of what this dream is showing us.
Mhm.
Because there's enough light to see, but we're almost in nighttime. You know, a restaurant is an image of abundance and sustenance, meaning having enough to sustain us will often connect to images and dreams of food. And restaurant has certainly got a kind of abundant sensibility if you're able to dine out.
Mhm.
But we're leaving the restaurant. So we're leaving the current, Rachel's current sense of what abundance looks like. And we're in the alley. The alley is the spaces between. It's a bit of a shadow scenario when we're in an alley because we're
Oh.
not in visible, social, interactive space where things can happen behind the scenes that nobody sees in the alley. So that means the psyche is opening up and saying, this is a little bit hidden, but not completely hidden. Similar
Mhm.
to it's, not very bright out and kind of, sundown-ish. And alley is kind of visible, but also hidden, right? So both of these images suggest that Rachel is working through something that her psyche both knows a little bit about, but also there's more to learn in the shadow place. And then we get the panhandler scenario, and that's the juice.
Right.
That is the yummy nugget of this dream.
It's what she's dealing with, right? In the alley
Correct.
of her mind. She's
That's
having
yeah,
issues
yeah.
with abundance.
Well, she's with her rejection of
Ah,
abundance.
okay.
There's something interesting about I give the coin to the panhandler, which means I have an impulse to share.
Mhm.
And the panhandler in this dream rewards the flow of abundance by multiplying it and bringing it back greater.
Mhm.
This is a high level spiritual trope about abundance. When we give from the overflow, we are returned with that abundance multiplied.
Mhm.
This is a teaching. It's a spiritual teaching that says we must give money with the same delight that we receive money. And when we do that, it flows back to us. And this is what the panhandler is showing her.
Mhm.
I express my generosity and my willingness to share of my overflow by giving you a coin. And you show me that from the places in shadow, the panhandler's a shadow character. It's a figure from below that says, I look like I don't know anything about abundance because I'm a panhandler. But in fact, what the panhandler is showing Rachel is that as you give to me, you will get back more.
Hmm.
And she says, well, no, that ain't right. She argues, right? But then it happens above and beyond. She gives 2 coins. And he's like, okay, this is how this works. You give freely from the overflow, you'll get back multiplied abundantly. You go from 1 coin to one $20 bill to 2 coins and 2 $20 bills.
Mhm.
That's the lesson. When we are in waking life experiences, we're terrified that our money is limited, that giving out money is bad and receiving money is good. And that's not how abundance works.
Mhm.
So she then tells us that she's, in fact, in a kind of, dicey waking life reorientation around what money and abundance means for her. And the dream life is letting her connect to the fundamental principles of as we give, we receive, so that she can wake up and face this, scary moment where it's more like real life high stakes money.
Hmm.
The last thing that she says is, it doesn't feel like a scam, but I still said no, or I still shut it down.
Mhm.
That's very telling, right? The idea that she would say it didn't feel like a scam means it's definitely not about something hidden or nefarious or dangerous, really. To me, this validates my interpretation of she's learning deeper lessons about abundance. But the fact that she still says no is actually good news, right? We want our dreams to show us where the work is.
Hmm.
So the I don't think it's a scam, but I still said no. That's the place where Rachel needs to go to and look in the mirror and say, there's still a place in me where I'm afraid that if I surrender to these risky things I'm trying, my abundance will stop.
Hmm.
And that can't happen.
Registration is now open for Diving into the Shadow. This class is a 4-week online course that meets on Zoom and dives into shadow work. Class starts March 5th and meets for 4 Saturdays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. If you are unable to make that time, recordings do get sent out after that class so you can follow along. Head on over to michaellennox.com and click the Classes tab to find out more. Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.